the state of sort of the talent market, as you know, over your long career, there's peaks and valleys throughout all of it. And I think we're at an interesting point right now where many talent acquisition teams sort of have more downtime. And the question is, what can they do with their downtime? How can they maximize their resources? How can they maximize strategies and, just become better talent acquisition professionals? So without further ado, Angie, I'm going to pass it over to you to introduce yourself, say hello to everyone, and we'll get started after that.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on the show, on the webinar. I'm really excited to be here. We've had some great pre-webinar chats as well. So just a little bit about my background, and it actually resonates with the peaks and valleys. I'm a stockbroker turned recruiter. So I used to work for Morgan Stanley and moved over to recruitment after September 11th. It was just natural. My recruiter said, "Why don't you become a recruiter?" And so I said, "Sure." And 20 years later, here I am. I have worked in small companies. I started off in agency recruitment. And for those people who have or have been working in agency will totally relate to that. We used to pick up real phones and cold call. So I got some really great experience from my broker days to agency days, and then moved over to help organizations build TA functions from scratch. I worked at small companies, large companies, consulting companies. And then I decided one day I'm going to take a leap of faith and start my own little thing and see how it works. And it works. So now instead of me building TA functions for other organizations, which is what I started off doing, we help our clients build internal TA functions and help them when they're looking to scale. So that's a little bit of my story. I'm originally from Chicago. But have a Greek background. I'm Greek, 100% Greek. My real last name is Angelopoulos. I don't use it because Angelopoulos just doesn't, some people like it, some people don't. People know me as Angie Verros. And I'm currently in Greece. I go between Chicago and Greece, and it's about 100. It was about 118 degrees here 2 weeks ago. We're at about 100 today. So we're doing great. That's my story, Kunwar, and I'm sticking to it.
Amazing. Well, I'm glad things have cooled down, hopefully a little bit. Hopefully they continue to be cool. And I love that you shared your background, because I think, one of the first conversation pieces that I wanted to have with you is, over the course of your sort of over 20 years in talent acquisition, you've had a responsibility and sort of a cool insight on building talent acquisition functions, right? And many times from the ground up, both for clients and internally. So can you talk about sort of some of those pieces of what went into building a talent acquisition function, and what are some critical components that you kept in mind as you were building them?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think that you have to be very agile when you're working with different teams. I think that it takes a little bit of time and patience to build it correctly. So you can't just jump in and day one expect that you're just going to build something. You start from day one, you look at some technology to help you move forward. I'm not saying that technology will replace you, but you look at systems, you look at process, and you move through to try to build a talent acquisition function. I think that right now during this downtime, or we're not at the downtime question yet. I'm just making sure we're not. We're not.
No,
not okay. Just wanted to make sure.
Yeah.
So it takes a little bit of time. You have to have a great process. And with that process, if you follow it, I always call it trust the process. Sometimes people don't think that in the very beginning, you're going to get to where you need to be, because it does take a little bit of time, but we use this all the time. And one of my colleagues and very great friends and industry peers, Stephanie David, who's on here, we always say it, trust the process, because it does take a little bit of time for it to work. So if you have a good plan in place and you couple it with a little bit of technology and have some good people, it'll take a little bit of time, but you'll be able to get there. I hope I answered that question.
Yeah, 100%. And I think, for the audience, the reason we wanted to establish that first is before you understand where you are right now and what to do with sort of your existing resources, it's good to get some insight on sort of building it from scratch and doing it the right way, right? So Angie, if you don't mind, I want to ask a couple of follow-ups.
Sure.
When you are building those functions, and it may differ from the goals of the organization, but I would love like an example of when you were building a specific function, like what were the components that you were looking at? Like what did you think was critical to organizational success as you were building it from the ground up?
Yeah, I think that you need to, there's three things that I think that are critical when it comes to building something. And everybody's got their own, I guess, their own ways of thinking. But for me, communication is critical. Number one, you have to have great communication skills, whether it's writing an email or whether it's talking to someone. You need to clearly communicate so that you can manage requirements, manage expectations, and those things. You don't, it's not rocket science to be able to have, to be able to communicate with your peers, with your clients, with your colleagues. I also think that you definitely need to have a sense of critical thinking. There's a certain level of professionalism and, talking through certain ideas. So how can you figure out if somebody is a critical thinker or not? That's also something that you're looking at hard skills versus soft skills. I think critical thinking can be learned in a certain fashion where you follow or shadow somebody that you're working with. But I think most of it comes, or either you have it or you don't. And I think it's extremely critical. How ironic. I think it's very important that you have that critical thinking piece. Someone who's going to, I guess, as cliched as it is, think a little bit outside the box in order to try to get the job done, right? And then that kind of goes along with the aptitude and willingness. I think that would be my number three if we're looking at some of the skills required. So as we know, things are extremely volatile in the talent acquisition world these days. And we experienced this during COVID. I personally experienced it many years ago when I was in agency. And there's peaks and valleys, and it happens. I also experienced it when I used to work as a stockbroker. I was there for when the internet bubble burst. I was there for Y2K. Now I'm dating myself. But I think when people have the willingness to learn and they take the time, I think that's going to be critical as well. You don't have to, let's say, for example, be a recruiter in order to do the job. I know that there are certain skills that you need to have in order to deliver and to produce. But if you have the aptitude and the willingness to learn those things, I think you can be very successful at that. And I actually have some examples. You might ask for some of those at Vaia, hiring people who had zero experience, but wanted to learn, had the drive and the willingness and the aptitude. And we taught them how to be great sourcers and recruiters.
100%. I think you bring up a really good point, because especially in a time of downtime where organizations maybe don't have as many open roles or have maybe a lot on their plates as they would maybe, like, let's say a year ago, a year and a half ago, taking that time to sort of focus on skills that are going to make you better across the board, whether it's recruiting or within any other professional capacity, I think is critical. We had an interesting conversation sort of about critical thinking, right? Like, I'd love to focus on that one, because I think at times, like I could say from my experience, I graduated, I think 2.5 years ago, and this has been my first job out of college, right? And while I did have critical thinking skills within school, like translating that into a professional setting was like a whole new ball game for me, right? And I think there's some people, whether they're new professionals or shifting roles, are trying to develop those critical thinking skills. You and I had an interesting conversation about how you sort of manufacture, or at least try to empower people to critically think. What has that process been like? I know you mentioned that shadowing process. Like, can you explain that for the audience, how you help develop critical thinking?
Absolutely. So I think shadowing is key. And again, we hired several people on our team that had no recruitment or sourcing experience. So how do you teach somebody, for example, all of the different aspects of a day in the lifetime of a recruiter, right? You've got, and the folks that are on here who come from talent acquisition understand there's client management or hiring manager management, there's intake calls or requirements gathering calls, whatever you want to call them. So how do you sit down and teach somebody all of these who comes from a different profession? Well, I came from a different profession and I learned it. How did I learn it? I actually shadowed. And that was probably the best way that I I learned how to become, a recruiter initially. I will have to say also that I had a very, very tough boss when I was at Morgan Stanley. His name is Joe Silich. He's still a great friend and a mentor, and I go to him all the time. But there was always a push, for me to be better and do better. And how did I do it? I followed his lead, and I followed his lead from the very beginning. And so I took bits and pieces of that, took bits and pieces of some of my other bosses that I had in previous organizations. And I thought, you can't tell somebody do it and do it like this. I mean, you can, but first of all, it's not really nice. And it's probably not the best way of teaching somebody. I think shadowing is probably, at least for me, been the best way to do it. And I'll give you one example. We've got recruitment project managers that need to talk to clients, that need to know how to manage expectations with candidates, that need to maybe not do the sourcing, but have to look at the profiles, make sure that they're the right fit, and have these have these constant communications with the hiring teams. So what we did is follow me. I will start a project from start to finish, and I want you to shadow me. I want you to get on every weekly call. I want you to watch me when I'm sourcing. I want you to watch me when I'm talking to candidates. I want you just to watch me, and watch me as many times as you want, as you feel comfortable, so that you could figure out how we're doing the job. And when you're ready to do it yourself, I will gladly watch you, and then I will give you some constructive criticism. I've actually had people that have joined my company who have said, is it okay if I watch you one more time? Can I just shadow you again on that other call because you said some great things? And I will say we have a lot of examples, but one example for me, I just got chills watching one of my colleagues get on a call and do it and say the things that I said. The way that I said them, to describe our process, to tell hiring teams how we work after shadowing me, for a number of times. I just felt amazing. I thought, number one, she wanted to learn. So we go back to that aptitude and the willingness. So she wanted, and she shadowed me. She shadowed me for 2, 3, 5 weeks. I don't remember exactly how long it was, but she shadowed me until she felt comfortable so that she could actually get on a call and manage the client's expectations. And I will tell you, this person had zero experience. She came from no recruitment. She came from no sourcing. I mean, it was completely different. And she's one of our top recruitment project managers. So for me, that was amazing. I love it. I get excited. Because to me, I feel like I've done a good job when I watch people, move forward after they've watched me do it the way that I think it should be done. Now, everybody has their own way of, doing things, but the way that I think that we've been bringing success to our clients. Long-winded, but I hope that gave you something.
No, that was incredible. And I think Maggie brought up a really good point. Shadowing helps you skip from level 1 to level 3, right? So it's like almost that process of, I always thought early on in my career, like I needed an instruction guide on everything that I needed to do. But what I realized was like getting an instruction guide and getting told what to do, you almost reduce the ability for people to think for themselves because they're being handheld or giving exact instructions on how to do everything. Rather, seeing someone who's great at something do it, you pick up the things that you think are great about what they do. And you can also infuse a little bit of like what you think would be right to do. And you almost come up with like a new, better formula in some situations, right? So
Yeah.
I think that process of really just shadowing and allowing people to grow into their roles while getting the skills almost like indirectly-ish is, I think it's such a powerful piece that people miss sometimes. And
Yeah.
I love what you said about aptitude and willingness. I think, we had a conversation about sort of the market right now. And, unfortunately, some talent acquisition teams have been downsized and, people are looking for new opportunities and other ways to apply their skills that they have, right? So talk a little bit about sort of, you've transitioned roles, right? But how can people use aptitude and willingness within specific skill sets to sort of be open to new ideas or open to new opportunities they might not have otherwise had?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And before we get to that, because I'm paying attention to the chat, which is kind of distracting, but it's pretty great because I see
Yeah.
David, and I have to say, I have to give him a shout out. So David Marr has been posting open roles on LinkedIn, and he's been tagging me. I think we're on list 41, if I'm not mistaken. And so just the fact that he's been sharing that to help the community, and I know hireEZ is all about community as well. Number one, massive shout out to David. And number two, what he's saying about working with a mentor and faking it until you make it. I mean, in a good way, right? I remember Joe at my broker boss at once said to me, when you go on a client call, I mean, I was straight out of college and nobody wanted to give me their millions to invest, but he said, you got to fake it till you make it. So, wear your glasses, look a little older when the client or prospective client offers you some wild turkey, which I had no idea what that was at the time. I don't drink it anyway. You say yes and you drink it anyway. Fake it till you make it. And when you follow someone, you'll learn how to fake it till you make it. And I think the fake it till you make it piece is you're not really doing something bad. You're trying until you feel comfortable. I guess the make it piece is now I feel comfortable. The fake it piece is I'm going to try to wing it and I'm going to try to talk the way that Angie did, or whoever my mentor is, and get to the point where I feel confident. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah.
But to your point about the aptitude and the willingness and wanting to learn, I think that's where we were, right?
Yeah.
Yes. I think that there's a couple different things that we can look at here. So some people are specialists in one area of, whatever they decided to study. And so if they're consistently wanting to be in that specific role, let's say, for example, you're focused on marketing. And if your focus is just purely marketing and you don't want to do anything else, well, you really don't have much aptitude or willingness to learn something. You want a marketing role.
Right.
However, if you're open to doing other things that may include some sort of marketing aspect, maybe it's a little bit of sales, maybe it's a little bit of business development. My background is in marketing. I was I was a major in economics, didn't really like economics, moved over to marketing, and I thought I was going to go work for some large brand and do some of their marketing. And lo and behold, I went into finance and then into recruitment. I mean, go figure. I don't even know how I got here. And so I think that if you have that willingness to change, you can go into so many different directions. So I think when we talked last, we used the example of if you're a specialist, let's say if you're a specialist in ABC, and there's a demand for ABC, well, you're in great shape. However, what if the demand for ABC is no longer there? What happens now if you're a specialist in, maybe not a specialist, but you have great knowledge and background in A plus B plus C, or a little bit of A and a little bit of B, maybe no C, I don't know, I'm just kind of making this up. Well, then more opportunities arise because you're not purely based on marketing. Maybe you've got your A is marketing, your B is sales, and your C is, I don't know, writing. So
Right.
maybe a great opportunity for writing in an editorial piece comes up. Well, now you can go and you could submit for that because you've got that piece. You're not just specialized in one area. So I think that keeping your options open. I know, for example, in the finance world, there's rotational programs. So when you join as an investment banker or an investment analyst, even some of the large, like the McKinseys and the BCGs, there's rotational programs that you join. And so that way you get experience in a couple different areas. And then that way you have the ability to move and grow and go to a place where you want to be. So I do think that it's very helpful to have a variety of experience behind you, or the willingness to learn something that you don't have under your belt, because that'll give you more opportunities.
1000%. And I think the coolest part about that experience is even within the role that you're doing right now, if you're learning skills from other areas, it can definitely be applicable, or at least give you some sort of insight into what you're doing right now, even if you're not transitioning to something else, right? Like I've definitely seen the experience where even though I was focused on marketing specifically, like having conversations with customers, for instance, in sort of like a customer service role, helped me communicate better and be just a better person who's a listener from a marketing standpoint. So I fully agree. And I think that analogy is a great one in terms of the A plus B plus C and all other letters of the alphabet, if you can get that far, right?
Yes, absolutely. And I will say, I think that for us specifically, when we hired sourcers, we hired people who had zero sourcing experience, but they had a passion to learn and they had a passion to research. I think that in order to be a sourcer, and I know a lot of my sourcing friends will say the same thing, you have to be curious and you have to want to find and look and dig. Someone said to me the other day, she's an interior designer and she was sharing her screen with me. and she was moving things and making things bigger and smaller, and she was using Photoshop, and she was doing all these things. And I was just sitting there in awe, like, oh my God, how do you have the patience to move this little thing from here and change this color and do this? And she goes, I love my job, and I can sit here for 10 hours a day and not leave my computer and do that. And then she continued to say, I just don't understand how people can go to work and not love what they do. And I said to her, oh my God, we're both nerds, because you love to design and do Photoshop and whatnot. I love to put the radio on or music or whatever and have nobody bother me and just sit and research and source. Like if I'm looking for people, I love that piece. And people think, well, how can you sit at a desk for so many hours and just do research? Well, I love it. I love doing that. So naturally, I think I'm going to do well at it. So to each their own, right? So when people, I think, are curious and they have the willingness and the, again, keywords, the aptitude to learn, when you teach them in one way or another, have them shadow you, they'll be good at it.
1,000%. And I think, we brought up an interesting conversation where, people or teams are able to use their downtime right now to sort of upskill in those three critical areas and then, expand from there where they can. And I think right now there's a pretty big conversation around pipelining and sort of nurturing relationships, even if you don't have open roles right now, or your organization may not be looking to hire immediately, right? So I think, there's two parts to this conversation. The first thing that I would love to address for those who maybe don't know what pipelining is or nurturing those relationships, can you talk a little bit about what that means and like what the actual benefits of doing that are, especially, in this market?
Yes. Okay. So this is my favorite. So pipelining is the act of finding people. I'm just kidding. Pipelining is building lists, right? Let's find a skill set, let's say Java, and let's build a list of all the Java folks that work at startup companies in the Bay Area. I'm making that up. So why are you building that pipeline list? Do you have an end purpose of building that pipeline? So anybody can build a list of people. I mean, especially with, all the tools and tech that are out there, like hireEZ, you go and you put in your requirements and there's your list, right? You can export it and you've got all those people, you can reach out to them, you can do whatever you want. Now, the question is, if you don't have active roles that you're sourcing for, what are you going to do with that list? So I have a couple different things that we did here internally, and we've also been sharing this information with our clients. There's got to be an end goal to pipelining and nurturing. Like, it's great to build the list of Java engineers, for example, and reach out to them and, every 3 days, 5 days, 6 months, however, whatever you want to do, with some content and some information. What's the end goal of doing that with those Java engineers? Now, I'll give you one example. So I'm going to do a little bit of name drop, but we've been working with L'Oreal for several years. And so they have been looking for chemists and researchers, aside from some other types of roles. Now, we know that there's a constant need for pipelining those types of professionals. And so for us to pipeline and build lists of those types of professionals, knowing that they will eventually start hiring again, there's an end goal, right? We're building the list of those people. Now, I'm kind of torn between the pipelining and the nurturing. Do we start reaching out to people we don't really have active roles? I'm not 100% sure. If there's a relationship with a candidate, yes, I think that you should always keep the relationship, because relationships do matter. And we do that. I still keep in touch with the first girl I placed over almost 20 years ago. I think it's a fabulous relationship. We're constantly communicating. So I think that the pipelining and the nurturing piece has to have some sort of end result. Now, if there are some niche type roles, so we're talking about, a constant need on the L'Oreal side, constant need for chemists and researchers. Yes, let's build those lists, because we know that at some point we're going to have to reach out to them and share them, get them interested and share them with the client. Now, there's other types of maybe highly niche roles for, maybe some gaming companies. So we've worked with a couple of gaming companies that are looking for very, very, very niche type skills that are probably, there's not that many people. I mean, there are a lot of people, but not as many people as we would expect to find. So if we know that they're going to continue hiring at some point. Well, I think it's purposeful to build a list of those very niche professionals, because again, you have an end goal that you're going to want to reach out to those people and nurture them. I think if you're just pipelining just to pipeline and nurturing just to nurture, it's not going to work. You'll get some people that are interested, or you might just get a back effect or whatever you call it. You might just get them the wrong thing, where you reach out to all these people that you've been pipelining, and you let them know that there will be an opportunity at some point, but then there is no opportunity. Opportunity, job, role, whatever you want to call it. And then that doesn't, it backfires. That's the word I was looking for. And then it backfires because you're reaching out and nurturing all these relationships. And especially in today's market, when there's so many people that are looking for work, I guess if you're reaching out and you're giving them some sort of hope that you might have something for them, and then you don't, well, then you don't look that great either. So that's what I would say. I would say that if there's a purpose for doing the pipelining and building the lists, or as David said, name generation, I think that that's great. And then when you need to hit up those people, then I think that you can start reaching out to them when there's a real role or opportunity or whatnot.
I love that. I think something that gets overlooked often, especially, in a profession where you're reaching out to people constantly, you can almost get desensitized to the idea of like, I'm talking to someone's inbox, not a real person. So I think there's something that could be lost in terms of that intentionality of making sure like you have empathy for the person who's on like the other side of the inbox, and making sure that if you're going to communicate an opportunity, like it's one that's actually foreseeable and actually valid, right? And you don't want that to backfire with you. And I think you made a really good point about sort of the nature of, if you try to pipeline everything, like it's going to be probably not the best idea if you don't have an end goal in mind. And I think what we've seen on our end when we've talked to, clients and prospects alike, is there's a bit of like a hesitation of feeling like it's overwhelming to pipeline, or, it's like a lot of work and they're really not sure where to start. Do you have some advice in terms of, where people can begin pipelining and how they can take some small steps to get to a place where they feel comfortable even doing?
Yeah, I think I'm going to go back to the original, that when it comes to pipelining, there's got to be some sort of an end goal. So I think, someone mentioned in the chat, name generation. What exactly is name generation, right? I think we could talk a little bit about, you could create functions that you typically source or hire for, and build lists for those functions. So for example, gameplay engineers, gaming engineers, and production artists that some gaming companies hire. I think if you're able to pipeline and build those lists for maybe East Coast, West Coast, and Midwest, and you've got those lists ready to go, so that when your client or your hiring manager is looking to hire those types of people, that you're ready to go. I think you start small. I don't think you should say, let me pipeline all the Java engineers in the United States, because there's just too many people. Now, if you need to, again, if you know that you're going to need to hire back-end engineers on the East Coast, well, that's a good place to start. Then you start looking for people with back-end experience, and you start building those lists. So I think that is the best way to do it. I mean, just to build a list, I think is it's a moot point, because what are you going to do with it? And I can even say, just from like a sales and a business development perspective, we have, I will say, we have lists of, hiring managers and lists of TA directors and, decision makers, but we don't spam them. We don't reach out to them. Like, we really build relationships. We have a list of all of the, maybe the hiring directors or HR directors or TA directors at healthcare companies, and we follow their roles, and we try to, interact with the company and see if there's a way for us to partner together. There's got to be some purpose behind it, and it's got to be authentic and sincere. It can't be the spam. I mean, the amount of spam and the amount of emails that I get, and I'm sure a lot of people that are watching get this, sometimes it just like, it gets lost. And I think to myself, oh my God, do I do that? I don't want to be that person.
Right. 100%. We actually had a question come in the chat. I don't know if you saw it, Angie. That was actually pretty interesting, about how far in advance, from a timeline perspective, do you think it would make sense to pipeline for a role that's, opening at some point?
Yeah, I think that's a really good question. So I think if you know when the role will open, you'll have a better sense of when to start pipelining. And I think there's really no right or wrong answer on how far in advance should you start to pipeline. I think you need to know when it could potentially open, the difficulty of the role. Like if you know it's a very difficult role, you probably, excuse me, will want to start a little bit earlier than if it's, a role that has a ton of supply out there, or a ton of supply out there. So it'll be difficult. I will have to say there is a process when it comes to pipelining and then putting candidates through maybe an email campaign or reaching out to them or communicating with them somehow. So you have to take that into consideration. So if you need to, let's say, butts in seats September 1, you probably should start pipelining now, because you've got about 6 weeks before, not even, no, you got September 1, 2 weeks. But if you know that you're not going to hire this person until December 1st, well, then you'll probably want to start maybe in September or October. Again, I think it really depends on the role. If you're looking at like an executive or a C-level type role, we're talking months in advance, because these people are difficult, I wouldn't say difficult to find. I think with all the tools out there and with all the different types of techniques, that it's easy to find the people. I think it's just a matter of the difficulty level and how quickly you'll be able to engage with this person, get them interested, because people fail to realize that it's not finding them that's very difficult. It's how do you engage with them and get them interested. So the pipelining, if there's free time and your organization's given you an opportunity to pipeline against future roles, great, build those lists, but build those lists knowing that you'll eventually have to reach out to them so that you can get them interested. I don't know if I answered that question properly. I hope I gave some insights.
Yeah, I think so. And I'm sure we'll get a response in the chat as to that question on it. Yes.
Yes. Okay, great. Good. I'm glad.
And I think one thing you said, Angie, that I absolutely loved, and it's something we've seen in all the conversations we've had, like people aren't necessarily struggling to find people. It's really that connection point and engaging. And like you said, like I can tell you from personal experience, my inbox is constantly getting flooded with just a slew of everything from advertising to like open roles to really so much stuff. So I guess in the nature of today's market where like technology is so involved and people are getting messaged all the time, like what are ways that you've done, if you have an example or just a general concept of how you're sort of differentiating, being intentional, and actually speaking to people when they may be getting overwhelmed or oversaturated?
Yeah, I just throw it into Chat GPT and hope that it works. I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding. No, I definitely would do that. But wouldn't that be fun? I mean, I think
Yeah.
a lot of people are doing that. I really do take the time to reach out to people, and I'm highly, highly personalized. I mean, very, very personalized. So I will even go as far as there's a client that I would really like, and I don't want to say the name. I don't know if she's on here, but there's a client that I would really like, and she, the woman who's in charge, is also a fan of an author that I like, and it was clearly on her profile, and so I followed this TA director's profile, saw that she was a fan. And so I reached out, and in the subject line, I wrote, I'm also a fan of author, and at the very bottom of the message, I personalized it. And I also added a picture because I ended up meeting this author, and I said, but I guess I'm the lucky girl because I've met, the person that you're crazy about. And she responded. And she said, oh, wow, that's great. It's been great to connect with you. I mean, in not the exact words, but, let's stay close. And, if anything happens, we can potentially partner. And so for me, I thought that was a win. They're not a client yet, which I use yet because I would like for them to be a client, but I think I stood out. I think I stood out because I threw a couple of emojis in there. I threw a picture of the author, her favorite author. And, maybe I was annoying, but I don't think I was. And I will say one other thing, Kunwar. I I read a lot of the incoming mail that's spam. Sometimes I respond. It depends on the mood also, but I also learn from that. I really learn, and I also get some catchy lines as well. And so I can understand when someone's using technology to spam me, if you will, but I could also understand when someone's being sincere. So I like it when I receive a message from someone who's 100% sincere and authentic. And so I try to do the same thing. And the one way, the little secret that I'll use that I did unintentionally, not to receive spam on my LinkedIn profile. And for those of you who are watching it, please connect with me on LinkedIn. I have a little hand right before my name. And I don't know why I did that. I think I saw someone's profile. And so I did that. I just put my little hand there. So when I'm getting an automated email or a LinkedIn connection request, and they don't remove the hand, I know that they're using some sort of robot or technology. So I know that they're not being, that they are automated emails or in-mails. I don't care for that. Sometimes I correct people, or sometimes I get, hello, Verros. Well, that's my last name, not my first name. So why would you not address me as hello, Angie?
Right.
And so that's the way that I kind of weed it out. But that's what I like to do. I really like to be intentional and targeted when I reach out to people. I know some people on here probably disagree with me because they'll probably say, well, high volume or business development, you need to go out and reach out to a lot of people. There's ways that you can do that. There's ways that you can use technology. hireEZ, you can personalize and you can add in information. But I think that when you have an end goal of, I want XYZ to be my client, or I want XYZ to get the job at this company, you're just going to take an extra step and you're going to be highly personalized on how you reach out to that person so that you can make that connection request, regardless of how you're going to do it. Is it going to be LinkedIn, direct message, whatever you're going to do? I think that that's the way to go. And trust me, it works. For me, it works. And I hope you're nodding to agree with me.
1,000%. I mean, from all the conversations we've had and what we've been pushing the most is sort of that personalization element, because it really does make a difference when you're being overwhelmed by everything that's so copy paste, especially with sort of the advent of like GPT. A lot of people, I think there's ways to be creative with that, right? Where you can sort of like add a personalization level to that, but some people just do the baseline and think like that's enough. And when a lot of people are doing the same thing, you're not going to be able to stand out, right? And I actually think like listening to your answer, it made sense, to call to something you said before about the 3 skills that you need to work on. Because what you exemplified in that personalized email is clear communication with an individual, critical thinking and thinking about how can I stand out to this person, and an aptitude, willingness to learn, right? Like you want to learn about that person, and that small amount of effort that you're putting in is actually going to make a huge difference. And even if you're not getting, your end goal right away, you built that relationship with that person that you mentioned, right? So I think, those are really valuable things that people can take away from just a personalization standpoint, but also just skills building, right?
100%. I think 1,000%, if you
Nice.
spend a little more time doing better work, your output will be better, as
Yeah.
opposed to spending less time trying to automate. Now, I'm not saying automation is not good. You should automate some of the repetitive tasks 100%. But I think when your end goal is that that was my end goal. I want this company as my client. I'm going to do whatever it takes to stand out, because I don't want to be that person who's sending the email that I'm getting. I mean, I got an email today, to asking me for a job. Like, oh, your background looks great. Would you be interested in like a customer success manager role? And I thought, did you really look at my profile?
Yeah.
Because I'm not a customer service manager and I would never take that. I mean, it was just very, very weird. So there's a lot of noise out there. And I think the noise does well for people like myself,
Yes.
because
Exactly.
I do it differently. So it's been working. And again, some people think too much time, too much work, but I think that when you do spend the time to do something like that, your output will be tenfold.
1,000%. And we actually
Yeah.
had an interesting question come in from Maggie. So she said, what is a function or thing that TA teams often underutilize within their ATS? Angie, if you think that's something you maybe could speak to.
What is a function or thing that TA teams often underutilize within their ATS? So that is a really good question. So ATS, the big fat elephant in the room, is there a perfect ATS? Probably not, because there are so many that are out there, but there are certain ones out there that cater to, small, large enterprise companies. I think, and I'll speak from experience, there's a lot of things that I think some people don't utilize from their ATSs. I think using the email capability coupled with a tool like, I know hireEZ integrates with a lot of different tools. I think that capability is underutilized. I really do think that. I think some people do get stuck in old ways and reach out to candidates individually or via LinkedIn. And that way there's no integration for the team to understand. So I think that piece is underutilized, I think, in ATSs. I think that there are some amazing organizations that do it well, utilizing their ATSs the way that they should. I think the scheduling piece might also be underutilized because you want a process. Again, we're going back to, you need to have a solid process. You can have the best technology in the world, but if you don't have a solid process, the technology is not going to work. So I think if you build a process and the technology follows suit and you actually follow it, you'll do well. I think what happens with applicant tracking systems is that sometimes you use it, sometimes you don't. And then that way there's data everywhere and there's not one source of truth. And so that happens when you're working with hiring managers because they don't want to be involved in the ATS, or your candidates don't want to log into the system or whatnot. So I think, again, you have to find out what suits your organization's needs in order to hire and scale and make sure everybody is on the same page. But I will say off the top of my head, I think that the emailing capability or drip campaigns or outreach campaigns coupled with a hireEZ and the scheduling piece, I think are underutilized because I think some people think that it's easier. Let me just send off an email or let me just send off an invitation, but there's no cohesion within the team to see, all of the information that should be in the system. I hope I gave you a little bit of insight, Maggie, and happy to continue talking further about this topic or offline as well.
100%. And we actually had an anonymous attendee send in a question that's semi-related. So I think this one's a two-parter. What are your favorite automation tools that can be used in conjunction with CRMs in an ATS? And then what about AI tools in general, I think?
Ooh, okay. Automation tools that you can use within your CRM and AI
ATS.
tools?
Yeah, within their CRM or ATS. And then the second question was, what about AI tools in general? I guess in terms of maximizing your resources, AI tools are a lot more apparent than So if you have capabilities.
Gosh, there's so many tools out there. I don't know what's my favorite. I will have to say that automating hireEZ with our applicant tracking system is pretty amazing because it's all in one place. So we don't have to look outside of that. I think that is something that has helped us tremendously. I also think that from an AI perspective, like, what is the best AI tool out there? I don't know. I mean, we all have experimented and we're all playing around with ChatGPT, and I use it. I use it when I do research. I ask, what's the population of this company or of this country and how many, accountants live there or something like that, right? I never get the right answer, or it comes back and says, I cannot give you the proper response. You could check out these sources, then you go to those sources and blah, blah, blah. I think I'm still at the point where I'm experimenting with anything and everything that's out there. I think, again, I'm not the tool specialist, or there are too many tools out there to use. And I'm a little more removed from the day-to-day sourcing. I still love to source. I use hireEZ for sourcing. And sometimes I go a little old school Boolean just because it's just for fun, because I like Boolean. But I do think that for every organization, it's going to be different. So for a favorite, it will also depend. Are you a small company? Are you a large company? How many people are on your team? What's the purpose of you using your ATS? Is it high volume? Is it, maybe 1 or 2 hires per month? And I think from that point, once you determine, again, I'm going to use the term end goal, what you determine is the place that you need to get to, then you could figure out what kind of tools will work together. I mean, I use little basic tools for scheduling my personal interviews. You can book me. Calendly, like we all have those.
Yeah.
I love those. I think those are amazing because they help save time. And again, the automation piece is the piece that helps save time. So there is really no perfect answer when it comes to like what tool is coupled with what. For me, I think you need to try and test. Not everything, because there's too many tools out there. Follow some people who are big on tools. There's several in the community. Ask around, do a couple of demos, and then try to test them out, but not everything. And then see what works for you when it comes to, when it comes to your organization's needs. I hope that gave you something.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, Dean has a great list on all of the tools. And I think Angie pointed out something really important that I think we've been sort of the theme of today, where it's you want to think about function and end goal first, right? So we always say with technology selection, even if people are talking to us on our side and they want to review our technology, we want to make sure there's synergy so that the end goals that you're trying to achieve, like our organization is able to provide. And there may be situations where, it's not a match, and that's okay. Like it's important that you find the resources you need to make sure that you actually achieve the end goals that you want. And David, I appreciate the shout out. And we actually are in the process of releasing more freemiums to all of our users, whether it's our recruiting GPT function, our Boolean builder that's already available on our site, and we're releasing more. So hoping to get those in your hands soon, David. So thank you for that shout out. I know Anya did ask a question. I guess people want to pick your brain in terms of favorite tools again, but is there anything you recommend automation from a high volume recruiting perspective?
Gosh, I think there's so much out there for high volume. So high volume is, I wouldn't say it's difficult to source for high volume. You just have to do a lot of it. I will have to say for high volume, I think programmatic marketing is probably a really good way to do high volume, have the people come to you. I'm not a pro at that. I will have to say, just like Dean DaCosta is, our sourcing tools guy, my tool friend that I call him. Steve Levy is also another really great person out there. There's a lot of people. And again, connect with me. I'm happy to help. I think for high volume recruiting, which we personally don't do a lot of high volume recruiting. I mean, high volume, we'll do like 50 roles, but we won't do like the 3,000 drivers or things like that. I think there's got to be a way to market those and have people incoming. So some different types of landing pages that can be built with different tools. And again, I'm not privy to all the different resources that are out there, but there are some really great people that I do know that work in a high volume setting. And Anya, I'm happy to connect with you offline, to give you some recommendations. But I would probably have to say, you probably would want to do a little bit of sourcing. I'm not a big fan of post and pray, but customized and targeted landing pages for those roles to drive in traffic into your ATS or CRM is a really good way to go. And there are several tools that are out there. I just don't know them off the top of my head, but again, happy to brainstorm with you and help out however I can.
100%. So we got to thank you from Anya. So thank you again for breaking that down.
Of course.
So we do have 10 minutes left. If there's anything else that anyone else wants to ask about sort of the content that we've covered today, I think we've done a lot in terms of discussing, how people can really optimize their time right now, both from a team perspective, but also as an individual to grow professionally, to sort of upskill, to sort of build those relationships now that could be fruitful for whether it's future open roles or future networking in terms of, talent acquisition and beyond. If there's anything else anyone has, we've sent Angie's LinkedIn within the chat itself. We'll also send a follow-up email next week with the webinar recording, some resources from Angie about her organization if you want to touch base, see if there's any services you might need or just be interested in learning about, and as well as her LinkedIn so you can connect. But Angie, any closing thoughts, any closing remarks, maybe you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would. First of all, I would like to say thank you to you and Ashley and the entire hireEZ crew for having me on, because I think that this is amazing. You're a very easy person to talk to, and I think we've had a really great conversation, and it's endless. There's so many things that I think we can talk about. For those of you that are watching this that are open to work or have been affected, because I know there have been a lot, I am happy to help however I can. I will have to say that we also have been affected. And so we've had to downsize a little bit, but I think that things will turn around, whether it's at the end of this year or early next year. we're used to the peaks and valleys. That's the line of the business that we're in. If there is anything that I could do to help anybody who is on here, whether it's a connection request or an introduction, or whatever, in addition to what David's doing, because David's doing an amazing job, please don't hesitate to reach out. I will get back to you. I may not get back to you right away. If there's a lot of you on here that reach out to me, but I will get back to you, because I do value the relationships and the networks that I've built throughout these years. So please let me know how I can help. Follow David's list. I think it's fabulous. And there are a lot of jobs that are out there, and connect with people and have open and honest and sincere conversations. I think when I first got into the business, gosh, I wish I would have known then what I know now, which I didn't, because back then I used the yellow pages and a phone with a cord, but I learned the hard way, but it gave me, I guess, the grit. That's also really a great skill that we didn't talk about. The grit to really go out there and be successful. And for me, I had no other option. That's what I wanted to do. What was my point? My point was, when I would meet people in real life after doing a webinar or talking at a conference, people would come up to me and they would say, well, you really are authentic and real, just like you are online. 100%. Everybody should be like that. What you're posting and what you're saying, you should be that same person when you meet people, because it doesn't make sense for you to be this, fabulous online, person, tweeting and writing and Instagram stories and whatnot, and then people meet you and you're not that person. So
Right.
I think that is very, very important. So I take everything to heart. I put all my passion and emotion into my day-to-day, into my work. As a matter of fact, my daughter I think she's going to divorce me someday because, and my husband, because I work so much, because I love what I do. But take advantage of your network. And I think everybody who's been affected in this market, we've all been there, and we should all take a moment and help each other out. So again, however I can help, join me and shadow me on, some of the stuff that I do. I do it with my clients. My clients sometimes say to me, can we do a sourcing session so I could see what you're doing? Now, sometimes people would say, well, why would I do that? Because then I would show you all the tricks and tips that I know, and then you won't need our services. But nope. They actually still use us, and they put us in their plan for future hiring, because they see that we are the real deal, and we show them how we do our work. So happy to connect with each and every one of you. And I'm thrilled. Like, I'm so excited. It's almost 9 p.m. over here. And like, maybe it's the coffee, maybe it's the hype. I don't know, the excitement. I've had a blast.
Thank you so much. And so have we. And we actually had one more question come in. If you want to take it offline, you could definitely take it offline. But
Fine.
In the interest of sort of building those relationships, we had an anonymous attendee ask, how can they find a mentor? Where can they look to find people that they can connect with, they can learn from? How have you done that in your career, and how can they do it?
I'm sorry, how can they connect with other people?
Yeah, and almost find a mentor or someone to help them out.
Yeah.
Them.
Yeah. So there are a lot of people that are mentors and that are willing to take on mentees. And I'm happy to make some introductions as well. I have an amazing mentor who I met at an HR technology conference, and she is in the space. And I meet with her every single month, and she kind of gives me the slap in the face, wake up call, and do this and do that, but some really great feedback. And as a matter of fact, I am going to say this, and Stephanie, I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot, but Stephanie David, who should be on here, she works with us. And Stephanie, I think 10 years ago, had sent me a note and asked if we can connect. And I did. And I had a phone conversation with her, and Stephanie sent me a card. I still have the card. She sent me an actual card, handwritten, and saying, thank you so much for taking the time, because unfortunately, a lot of people don't take the time to talk
Right.
to a stranger, if you will. Right. And just do something like that. And lo and behold, Stephanie, Stephanie now is working with us. She's absolutely amazing. She goes above and beyond and does, she's just awesome. She really is awesome. There's not much I could say. And David's sharing her profile, so connect with her. Stephanie's probably going to be slacking me because she's like, what? But there are people that will do that. There are people that if you reach out to and you say, I'd like to learn a little bit more. I know there's others in our business that do that as well, that would be happy to mentor. And then there's loads of, data that's out there and content and conferences and whatnot. So I blame you, David. And yeah, reach out to me. I'm happy to help out however I can.